A dog lover whose female dog was in heat agreed to look after her neighbor's male dog while the neighbor was on vacation. She had a large house and believed that she could keep the two dogs apart. As she was drifting off to sleep late that night, she heard awful howling and moaning sounds. She rushed downstairs and found the dogs passionately locked together. Despite her best attempts, she was unable to separate them. She called her vet and explained the problem to him. Annoyed, the vet said, "Hang up the phone and place it on the floor alongside the dogs. I will call you back and the noise of the ringing will make the male lose his erection and you will be able to separate them." "Do you really think that will work?" she asked. "Just worked for me." An elderly couple got on a bus. After a few minutes, the old lady shuffled over to the front and offered the driver a bag of peanuts. How kind of her, thought the driver. He drove on, happily munching the peanuts. A few minutes later, again, the old woman shuffled over with another bag of peanuts. What a nice lady, thought the driver as he ate peanuts. Throughout the journey, the old lady kept on bringing the driver bags of peanuts. He was grateful, but understandably confused. Just before the couple got off, the driver asked the lady, "Thank you, but where did you get all those bags of peanuts?" The old lady smiled. "My husband and I love chocolate-covered peanuts." The driver frowned. "But they weren't chocolate-covered." The old man nodded. "Yef, you see, our teeth can't manage peanuts. We just suck the chocolate." A man prepares his donkey and dog for a long journey up a mountain. He places a pack saddle on the donkey's back and fills everything to maximum weight. Because of the weight, he decides to pull the donkey along so that it does not become tired as easily. The man, the donkey, and his guard dog now begin the long trip up a mountain to get to the other side. Hours into their long and quiet trip, the man becomes very tired. He stops the donkey and decides that he is going to ride it. Just as he starts to mount the donkey, out of nowhere, the donkey says, "Stop! I'm sick of being your mule. I hate you. Stop using me." The man is bewildered, as he has never once before heard an animal speak, and takes off running as fast as he can back down the mountain with the dog right behind him. As he gets to the bottom in record time, he stops and catches his breath. He is beyond scared and says in a scared tone, "Whoa, I have never heard a donkey speak before." The dog replies, "Me neither." One morning, on his way out to check on the cows, Farmer John says to Carol, "The insemination man is coming over to impregnate one of our cows today. I drove a nail into the rail above the cow's stall in the barn. You show him where the cow is when he gets here, okay?" So then the farmer leaves for the fields. After a while, the insemination man arrives and knocks on the front door. Carol takes him down to the barn. They walk along the row of cows, and when she sees the nail, she tells him, "This is the one right here." Terribly impressed by what he seemed to think just might be another ditzy blonde, the man asks, "Tell me, lady, how did you know this is the cow to be bred?" "That's simple. By the nail over its stall," Carol explains very confidently. Then the man asks, "What's the nail for?" She turns and starts to walk away, and with complete confidence says over her shoulder, "I assume it's to hang your trousers on." Barry returned from a doctor's visit one day and told his wife Carol that the doctor said he only had 24 hours to live. Wiping away her tears, he asked her to make love with him. Of course she agreed, and they made passionate love. 6 hours later, Barry went to her again and said, "Darling, now I only have 18 hours left to live. Maybe we could make love again?" Carol agreed, and again they made love. Later, Barry was getting into bed when he realized he now had only 8 hours of life left. He touched Carol's shoulder and said, "Darling, please, just one more time before I die." She agreed, and then afterwards she rolled over and fell asleep. Barry, however, lay there awake and listened to the clock ticking in his head, tossing and turning until he was down to only 4 more hours. He tapped his wife on the shoulder to wake her up. "Darling, I only have 4 hours left. Could we—" His wife sat up abruptly, turned to him and said, "Listen, I'm not being funny, Barry, but I have to get up in the morning and you don't." A man is wandering the desert, having lost his way, when he comes across a friendly-looking salesman with a suitcase. "Good day to you, good sir," the salesman greets him. "Water, please," is all the man manages to say through his sore throat. "Oh, I'm afraid I don't have any water on me, but I can offer you one of these stylish ties." With that, he opens his suitcase and presents a collection of colored ties. "I don't want a stupid tie. I need water," the wanderer says, and moves on. After a while, he sees a building in the distance. A sign over the door says free water, food, and lodging. The man approaches the building, incredulously reaching out to touch it to confirm that it is not a hallucination. As his hand touches the door, it opens. A man with a friendly smile is emerging. "Water, please," croaks the wanderer. "No problem," the man answers. "We have all the water you can drink." He sizes the wanderer up, and suddenly his face grows cold. "But I'm afraid there is no entrance without a tie." A man and his wife were on a driving holiday and looking for a hotel for the night. When they found one, the manager said, "Yes, we have a room and it's $100 for the night." That was well outside their budget, so they politely turned the offer down and asked if there was anywhere cheaper in the vicinity. The manager replied, "Yes, in fact, there is an old hotel just up the road, and it's only $25 a night, but I'll warn you now, there have been many reports of the place being haunted." The couple thought nothing of it and made their way to the cheaper hotel. When they arrived, they paid the $25 and, out of curiosity, asked the manager about the reported hauntings. The manager said, "Oh, that's just my rivals trying to drive me out of business. I've never seen any sign of a ghost in the 250 years I've been here." "My granddad was depressed because his prize marrows were not growing on his allotment, so I went along there to see if I could see what the problem was. When I got there, he was slumped over a pathetic, burnt little marrow. I looked around me and noticed that all the other allotments were basking in dappled sunshine filtering through the trees, but his was in the dark, except for a strong, burning ray of light. The cause was the huge window on a huge shed on the allotment beside him. It was reflecting the light directly on his marrows." "How long has this been here?" I asked. "Oh, well, Harold has had an allotment here with me since the war," he replied. "But that shed looks pretty new. When did he get it?" "Oh, last year, I think," he replied. "Well, there is your answer, Granddad." He looked at the shed, the rays of sun reflecting in the glass, and looked at the poor, shriveled marrow and smiled. We had shed light on the problem. One night, little Timmy asks his mom if he can take a shower with her. She says, "Sure, but don't look up or down." Well, Timmy looks up and says, "What are those, Mommy?" And Timmy's mom says, "Those are my headlights." Then little Timmy looks down and asks, "What is that, Mommy?" And she replies with, "That's my garage." The next night, little Timmy asks his dad if he can take a shower with him. He says, "Sure, but you can't look down." Well, little Timmy looks down and asks, "Daddy, what is that?" To which he replies with, "That's my limousine." A few nights later, little Timmy is having trouble sleeping and goes into his parents' room. He asks if he can sleep with them. After a bit of consideration, they say, "Sure, but don't look under the covers." Well, little Timmy does just that and screams, "Mommy, turn on your headlights! Daddy's limousine is parking in your garage." A retired man purchased a home near a high school. He spent the first few weeks of his retirement in peace. Then the new school year began. One afternoon, early into the first semester, 3 loud young boys came down his street, beating merrily on every bin they came across. They then did so the following day and the day after that, until finally the retiree decided it was time to take some action. The next afternoon, he walked out to meet the boys as they banged their way down the street. Stopping them, he said, "You kids are a lot of fun. I used to do the same thing when I was your age. Will you do me a favor? I'll give you each $1 if you'll promise to come around every day and do your thing." The boys were more than happy and continued to bang the bins every day on their walk home. After a week, the old man walked out and greeted the kids again. However, this time, he didn't have a smile on his face. "This recession's really putting a big dent in my income," he told them. "I'm going to have to cut it down to 50 a day to keep you kids banging the bins." The kids were obviously unimpressed, but they accepted the reduction in payment and continued their afternoon activities. A few days later, the man approached them again. "Look," he said, I haven't received my retirement checks yet, so I'm not going to be able to give you more than 25C to bang on the bins. Will that be okay? That's it! The drum leader exclaimed. If you think we're going to waste our time beating these around for 25C class a day, you're nuts. No way, mister, we quit. And the man enjoyed peace and serenity for the rest of his days. An Italian guy is out picking up women in Rome. While at his favorite bar, he manages to attract one rather attractive-looking blonde. They go back to his place, and sure enough, they go at it. After a long while, he climaxes. Then he rolls over, lights up a cigarette, and asks her, "So, you finished?" After a short pause, she replies, "No." Surprised, but pleasantly, he puts out his cigarette, rolls back on top of her, and has his way with her again, this time lasting even longer than the first. Again he rolls over, lights a cigarette, and asks, "So, you finished?" And again, after a short pause, she just says, "No." Stunned, but still acting reflexively on his macho pride, he once again puts out the cigarette and entertains his companion du jour. This time, with all the strength he can muster up, he barely manages to end the task, but he does, after expending quite a lot of time and energy. Barely able to roll over, he reaches for his cigarette, lights it again, and then asks tiredly, "So you finished?" "No, I'm Swedish." A man lies sprawled across 3 entire seats at a posh theater. Before the show has even started, an usher walks by and notices the man. "Sir, you're only allowed 1 seat. Can you please sit up?" The man groans, but stays where he is. The usher, becoming impatient with the man, says, "Sir, if you don't get up, I will need to get my manager involved." Again, the man just groans, which infuriates the usher as he marches off to get the manager. In a few moments, he returns with the manager, and they both repeatedly attempt to move him, but with no success. It was at this point that the manager called the police. Moments later, a police officer arrives and approaches the man. "All right, buddy, what's your name?" "Sam," the man moans. "And where are you from, Sam?" With pain in his voice, Sam replied, "The balcony." Tom wants a job as a signalman on the railways. He is told to meet the inspector at the signal box. To find out how Tom would react under pressure, the inspector asks him, "What would you do if you realized that 2 trains were heading for each other on the same track?" Tom says, "I would switch one train onto the other track, thus averting a disaster." "What if the lever broke?" asked the inspector. "Well, I'd run down to the tracks and activate the manual lever," said Tom. "What if that had been struck by lightning?" "Then," Tom continues, "I'd run back into the signal box and phone the next signal box." "What if the phone was engaged?" "Well, in that case," persevered Tom, "I'd rush down out of the box and use the public emergency phone at the level crossing up there." "What if the public phone was on fire?" "Oh, well, then I'd run into town and get my Uncle Bill." This puzzles the inspector, so he asks, "Is he in the fire department?" "No, he's never seen a train crash." A burglar was sneaking into a museum, and he had to get past the guard on duty. The guard had his head in his hands, and he was crying. "I can't believe I've worked here for 10 years, and everyone has forgotten my birthday again. Longer hours, more work, and no appreciation. I can't do this anymore," the guard said to himself as he continued to sob. The burglar could easily sneak past, but found himself feeling bad for the guard. Instead of proceeding with his plan, the burglar's sympathy for the guard got the better of him. He marched right down to the museum curator's office and kicked in the door. There sat the head of the museum, the head of HR, and the head of security in a meeting. "How did you get past the guard?" shouted the curator. "Gentlemen," said the burglar, "I'm afraid you have let your guard down." The first text message. "Dear John, this is Alan next door. I'm sorry, buddy, but I have a confession to make to you. I've been riddled with guilt these past few months and have been trying to pluck up the courage to tell you to your face, but I am at least now telling you in text, as I can't live with myself a moment longer without you knowing. The truth is, I have been sharing your wife day and night when you're not around. In fact, probably more than you. I haven't been getting it at home recently, but that's no excuse, I know. The temptation was just too much. I can no longer live with the guilt, and I hope you will accept my sincerest apologies and forgive me. I promise that it won't happen again. Please come up with a fee for usage, and I'll pay you. Regards, Alan." The response, John, feeling insulted and betrayed, grabbed his gun, stomped next door, and shot his neighbor dead. He returned home, poured himself a stiff drink, and went out into the garden for some fresh air. He took out his phone, where he saw he had a subsequent message from his neighbor. The second text message. "Hi, John. This is Alan next door again. Sorry about the slight typo in my last text. I expect you worked it out anyway, but as I'm sure you noticed, my smartphone's autocorrect feature changed Wi-Fi to wife. Technology, hey? Hope you saw the funny side of that. Regards, Alan." A duck walks into a pub and orders a beer and a ham sandwich. The barman looks at him and says, "But you're a duck." "I see your eyes are working," replies the duck. "And you talk," exclaims the barman. "I see your ears are working," says the duck. "Now can I have my beer and my sandwich, please?" "Certainly," says the barman. "Sorry about that. It's just we don't get many ducks in this pub. What are you doing round this way?" "I'm working on the building site across the road," explains the duck. Then the duck drinks his beer, eats his sandwich, and leaves. This continues for 2 weeks. Then one day the circus comes to town. The ringleader of the circus comes into the pub and the barman says to him, "You're with the circus, aren't you? I know this duck that would be just brilliant in your circus. He talks, drinks beer, and everything." "Sounds marvelous," says the ringleader. "Get him to give me a call." So the next day when the duck comes into the pub, the barman says, "Hey, Mr. Duck, I reckon I can line you up with a top job paying really good money." "Yeah," says the duck. "Sounds great. Where is it?" "At the circus," says the barman. "The circus?" the duck inquires. "That's right," replies the barman. "The circus?" the duck asks again. "Yes," says the barman. "That place with the big tent?" the duck inquires. "Yeah," the barman replies. "With all the animals?" the duck questions. "Of course," the barman replies. "With the big canvas roof with the hole in the middle?" asks the duck. "That's right," says the barman. The duck looks confused. What the heck would they want with a plasterer? A guy walks into a bar with his dog and says, "I'll have a scotch and water and my dog would like a whiskey sour." The bartender says, "Sorry, we don't allow animals in here." The dog replies, "Hey, I'm tired of being discriminated against. Just give me a drink." The bartender says, "Oh no, not another ventriloquist with the old talking dog trick. Both of you, get out of here." No, this isn't a trick, I promise you," says the man. "I tell you what, I'll go for a walk around the block and you talk to Gizmo here." The man leaves and the bartender sees him turn the corner. "Now, can I have my drink?" asks the dog. The bartender is amazed. "Sure you can, and it's on the house. Listen, can you do me a favor? My wife works next door at the cafe. It'll make her day if you go in and order a cup of coffee. Here's $10 and you can keep the change afterwards." "Okay," says the dog, and he takes the $10 and leaves. 10 minutes go by and the dog doesn't come back. The owner returns and asks, "Where is the dog?" So both of them go off to see what happened to the dog. As they approach the cafe, they see Gizmo going at it hot and heavy with a French poodle in the alley between the bar and cafe. The owner shouts, "Gizmo, what are you doing? You've never done this before." The dog shrugged. "Well, I've never had any money before." A fellow walks into a bar, notices a very large jar on the counter, and sees that it's filled to the brim with $10 bills. He guesses there must be more than $10,000 in it. He approaches the bartender and asks, "What's with the money in the jar?" "Well, you pay $10, and if you pass 3 tests, you get all the money and the keys to a brand new Lexus." The man certainly isn't going to pass this up, and so he asks, "What are the 3 tests?" "You must pay first." "Those are the rules," says the bartender. So after thinking it over a while, the man gives the bartender the $10 and the bartender drops it into the jar. "Okay," the bartender says, "here's what you need to do. First, you have to drink a whole quart of tequila in a minute or less, and you can't make a face while doing it. Second, there's a pit bull chained in the back with a bad tooth. You have to remove that tooth with your bare hands. Third, there's a 90-year-old lady upstairs who has never had sex. You have to take care of that problem." The man is stunned. I know I paid my $10, but I'm not an idiot. I won't do it. You'd have to be nuts to drink a quart of tequila and then do all those other things. Your call, says the bartender. But your money stays where it is. As time goes on and the man has a few more drinks, he finally says, "Where's the darn tequila?" He grabs the bottle with both hands and drinks it as fast as he can. Tears stream down both cheeks, but he doesn't make a face, and he did it in 58 seconds. Next, he staggers out the back door where he sees the pit bull chained to a pole. Soon the people inside the bar hear growling, biting, and screaming sounds. Then nothing but silence. Just when they think that the man surely must be dead, he staggers back into the bar, with his shirt ripped open and there are scratches and blood all over his body. He says, "Now where's that old woman with the bad tooth?" The moral of the story? Listen carefully to the directions and don't trust your judgment when alcohol is involved. A fellow decides to take off early from work and go drinking. He stays until the bar closes at 2 a.m., at which time he's extremely drunk. When he enters his house, he doesn't want to wake anyone, so he takes off his shoes and starts tiptoeing up the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, he falls over backwards and lands flat on his rear end. That wouldn't have been so bad, except that he had a couple of empty pint bottles in his back pockets, and they broke, and the broken glass carved up his buttocks terribly. But he was so drunk that he didn't know he was hurt. A few minutes later, as he was undressing, he noticed blood, so he checked himself out in the mirror, and sure enough, his behind was terribly cut up. Well, he repaired the damage as best he could under the circumstances, and he went to bed. The next morning, his head was hurting, and his rear was hurting, and he was hunkering under the covers trying to think up some good story when his wife came into the bedroom. "Well, you really tied one on last night," she said. "Where'd you go?" "I worked late," he said, "and I stopped off for a couple of beers." "A couple of beers? That's a laugh," she replied. "You got plastered last night. Where the heck did you go?" "What makes you so sure I got drunk last night anyway?" he asked, surprised. "Well," she replied, "my first big clue was when I got up this morning and found a bunch of Band-Aids stuck to the mirror." A teacher told her young class to ask their parents for a family story with a moral at the end of it, and to return the next day to tell their stories. In the classroom the next day, Joe told his story first. "My dad is a farmer, and we have chickens. One day we were taking lots of eggs to market in a basket on the front seat of the truck when we hit a big bump in the road. The basket fell off the seat, and all the eggs broke. The moral of the story is not to put all your eggs in one basket." "Very good," said the teacher. Next, Mary said, "We are farmers too. We had 20 eggs waiting to hatch, but when they did, we only got 10 chicks. The moral of this story is not to count your chickens before they're hatched." "Excellent," said the teacher again, very pleased with the responses so far. Next, it was Barney's turn to tell his story. "My dad told me this story about my Aunt Karen. Aunt Karen was a flight engineer in the war, and her plane got hit. She had to bail out over enemy territory, and all she had was a bottle of whiskey, a machine gun, and a machete." "Go on," said the teacher, intrigued. "Aunt Karen drank the whiskey on the way down to prepare herself. Then she landed right in the middle of 100 enemy soldiers. She killed 70 of them with the machine gun until she ran out of bullets. Then she killed 20 more with the machete till the blade broke, and then she killed the last 10 with her bare hands." "Good heavens," said the horrified teacher. "What did your father say was the moral of that frightening story? Stay away from Aunt Karen when she's drunk." Joe and his buddy Jim were known around town as a little less than clever when they weren't drunk, that is. One day, they are digging a ditch while their foreman sits on a lawn chair in the shade drinking lemonade. It's a hot day, and Joe starts wondering why the foreman isn't doing any of the work. "Hey, Jim," he asks, "how come we're down here digging the ditch and the boss is up there drinking lemonade in the shade?" "Dunno," Jim replies, and they go back to digging. After a while, Joe decides he needs to know. "I'm gonna go ask him." He climbs up out of the ditch and goes over to the foreman. "Hey, boss, how come I and Jim are down there digging the ditch and you're up here drinking lemonade?" The foreman looks at Joe and says, "Well, because I have intelligence and you don't." Joe scratches his head for a moment, then asks, "What's intelligence?" The foreman considers this and says, "Well, let me give you some." He holds his hand up in front of the trunk of a big oak. "Hit my hand as hard as you can." Joe shrugs, rears back, and swings. At the last moment, the foreman pulls his hand out of the way and Joe punches the tree instead. "What'd you do that for?" he cries. The foreman smiles. "I just gave you some intelligence." Joe heads back into the ditch, considering this. After a while, Jim asks him, "So what did he say?" Joe says slowly, "He says it's because he has a lot of intelligence. And I have a little bit of intelligence, and you don't have any intelligence at all." Jim asks, "What's intelligence?" Joe replies, "I'm not really sure, but he gave me some, and I'm going to give some to you." Joe holds his hand up in front of his face. "Hit my hand as hard as you can." An old man walks into a lady doctor's office and says, "Doc, I've got a problem, but you have to promise me one thing. You cannot laugh." The doctor nods solemnly. "Sir, I am a professional. In over 20 years of practicing medicine, I have never laughed at a patient." Satisfied, the man takes a deep breath and drops his trousers. The doctor is immediately confronted with the smallest you-know-what she has ever seen in her entire career. Despite her best efforts, a chuckle escapes, then another. Before she knows it, she's doubled over, gasping for air, laughing so hard she nearly falls off her chair. Minutes later, she finally regains control, wipes her eyes, and takes a deep breath. "I am so sorry," she says, trying to regain her professionalism. "I don't know what came over me. I promise it won't happen again. Now, what seems to be the problem?" The man looks at her, eyes full of despair, and says, "It's swollen." Johnny sits at the bar staring at his drink when a large troublemaking biker steps up next to him, grabs his drink, gulps it down in one swig, and menacingly says, "Well, thank you. What are you going to do about it?" Johnny burst into tears. "Come on, man," the biker says. "I didn't think you'd cry. I can't stand to see a man crying. What's your problem?" "This is the worst day of my life," Johnny says. "I'm a complete failure. I was late to a meeting and my boss fired me. When I went to the parking lot, I found my car had been stolen and I don't have any insurance. I left my wallet in the cab I took home. I found my wife in bed with the postman and then my dog bit me. So I come to this bar to work up the courage to put an end to it all. I buy a drink, drop a capsule in, and sit here watching the poison dissolve, and then you show up and drink the whole thing. But enough about me. How's your day going?" A man phones his wife and asks her, "Honey, I've been asked to go fishing in China with my boss for a week. This is a good opportunity for me to get the promotion. So could you please pack enough clothes for a week and set out my rod and fishing box? We're leaving the office, and I'll swing by the house to pick up my things. Oh, please pack my new blue silk pajamas." The wife noticed that there's something fishy in her husband's story, but since she was a good wife, she listened to her husband and did exactly as he told her. After a week, the husband returned home, looking a bit tired but happy to have done a good job. The wife immediately started asking about the weekend, how it was, if he'd caught any fish, and so on. The husband said, "Yes, lots of salmon, bluegill, and a few swordfish. But why didn't you pack my blue silk pajamas?" To which the wife responded, "I did, they're in your fishing box." One night, a guy takes his girlfriend home. As they are about to kiss each other goodnight at the front door, the guy starts feeling a little frisky. With an air of confidence, he leans with his hand against the wall, and smiling, he says to her, "Honey, would you take me upstairs?" Horrified, she replies, "Are you mad? My parents will see us." "Oh, come on, who's going to see us at this hour?" he asks, grinning at her. "No, please, can you imagine if we get caught?" "Oh, come on, there's nobody around, they're all sleeping." "No way, it's just too risky." "Oh, please, please, I love you so much." "No, no, and no, I love you too, but I just can't." "Oh, yes, you can, please." "No, no, I just can't. I'm begging you." Out of the blue, the light on the stairs goes on, and the girl's older sister shows up in her pajamas, hair disheveled, and in a sleepy voice she says, "Dad says to go ahead and take him upstairs if you want, or I can do it, or if need be, Mom says she can come down herself and do it, but for God's sake, tell him to take his hand off the intercom." Pedro gets a new secretary. He faces a volley of rapid-fire questions from his wife, who is always a bit suspicious of her husband's roving eye. Dora, Pedro's wife. Does your new secretary have nice legs? Pedro. Didn't quite notice. Dora. What color are her eyes? Rar, Pedro. Haven't had the time to check. Dora. What are the nail polish colors she uses, metallic, gel, or neon? Pedro. Not a clue in the world. Dora. Does she wear matte, glossy, or frosted lipstick? Pedro. I barely spoke to her, so I don't know. Dora. How does she dress? Pedro. Very quickly.